Hello ladies and gentlemen of the world, welcome back to my channel, but if you're new to my channel then welcome. My name is Zach Jones, although you probably know who I am. Today I'm doing a different kind of PowerPoint. This one is about dinosaurs. Now, when I was a little kid I had a fascination with dinosaurs, and I still do to this day, but this PowerPoint is about dinosaurs that not many of you know about. And I'm going to start with my favourite one, but also that second villain from the Jurassic movies, the Velociraptor. Now, Velociraptors were found in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia about just over 80 million years ago. Now, in the movies like Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, they are quite often portrayed as like very big, scaly reptilian creatures. But actually, turns out Michael Crichton, who wrote the original all Jurassic Park books, and Steven Spielberg, I mean no offence to him, got it slightly wrong. Velociraptors were actually about this kind of size. They were actually about the size of a giant turkey, and, like so many of the dinosaurs we know and love, it had feathers. In fact, it's actually been shown that with dinosaurs like Velociraptors, why they're more closely related to birds than reptiles, and even the very name raptor means bird of prey. Velociraptors were pack hunters, like wolves, lions, and harris hawks, and what they did was they used teamwork and tactics, but also brain power to tackle prey. Have to forgive that noise in the background. Anyway, Velociraptors had quite a large brain. They had one of the largest brains relative to their body size of any dinosaur. And because their teeth were too small to bite at their prey's throat like a lion, instead they used these larger 6-inch curved claws, a lot like a dagger on the first toe. And for many years it was speculated that they disemboweled their prey, like slashed at the stomach, but recent research has suggested that they might have been able to do that, or they more than likely would have used their claws to stab at their prey's throat, or to puncture the jugular, or stab at their prey's heart. And this is probably the most famous example of dinosaur fossils. It depicts a velociraptor in a death combat with a ceratopsian called the Protoceratops, which was around when Velociraptor was around. And it's so well preserved that we can see exactly what happened. Like here, the killing claw of the Velociraptor is thrust into the gut of the Protoceratops, while the Protoceratops grip the predator's arm. And no one's entirely sure what killed them. I mean, it might have been like a landslide of sand that buried them alive in mid-combat, but whatever it was, it made its very own dinosaur Pompeii, if you like. But, yeah, with Velociraptors, because they lived in packs, and like many dinosaurs, they laid eggs, and of course they were very intelligent animals, and they might have even been able to climb using their killing claws to help, like crampons, but I mean, fortunately, they aren't really around anymore, and to be honest, I am quite glad, because although they might be small, they made up for it with intelligence and ferocity. And of course, they died out at the same time as all the other dinosaurs of planet Earth about 65 million years ago, but I'll get to that bit later. And now, the next one I'm going to show you all is the largest known predator to ever walk the earth. It is Spinosaurus. Now, Spinosaurus is part of a group of dinosaurs that were only recently discovered, called the Spinosaurids. This strange group, it lived in North Africa, Asia, Europe and South America. But Spinosaurus was the biggest and the largest, and it lived in North Africa. And when I say it was the largest predator, I mean it was immense. It could grow 17 metres from nose to tail, weighed 11 tonnes, had 2 metre long spines rising over its back. Its skull was 1.75 metres in length, and of course it was bigger than T-Rex. But recent research done in 2011 showed something quite surprising. Chemical traces in the fossils, as well as analysis of their bones and teeth, showed that Spinosaurus probably lived a lot more like a crocodile than other land-based dinosaurs, meaning it spent a large part of its life around and in water. And the reason for that is because it was an ichthyophagus, which means a fish eater. Its main diet was mostly Onchopristis, which were 8 metre long giant sawfish, so a lot bigger than I am. It's believed that those sawfish migrated into freshwater rivers to breed, where the young may be safer, but the adults are exposed to new threats. A lot like modern day salmon. Incredibly, in 2008, when a Spinosaurus's jaw was put through a CT scanner, it revealed a curious pattern of holes and sinuses in the snout that were just like those of modern crocodiles, and it's actually thought that those contained pressure sensors, because modern crocodiles have these kind of sensors along their mouths that actually pick up vibrations in the water. So it's believed that because they could hold that Spinosaurus could have held its snout in the water because it had nostrils set high on its head and could actually feel the wake of its prey moving around, so it could strike without even seeing its prey. But of course, Spinosaurus's teeth were straight and conical, and like a crocodile, they evolved to grip prey rather than kill. So to kill its prey, it used its powerful forearms with long claws. You're all probably wondering when Spinosaurus was discovered. Well, it was actually discovered in Egypt in 1912 when fragments of its skeleton were unearthed. And for many years, we didn't really understand a lot about this animal until some more complete skeletons were discovered in like the 1980s and the late 1990s, when we could finally reconstruct it. And when I said about that it lived a lot more like a crocodile, and it probably didn't just live around water, it probably also could live in the water, like it could probably swim like crocodiles. The truth is, we may never know. But unlike crocodiles that could hibernate during times of hardship, when it was the dry season and much of its habitat dried up, Spinosaurus couldn't hibernate because it was an active hunter. Its metabolism demanded a regular supply of food. But although it was a specialist, it wasn't confined to the land. Well, it wasn't confined to the rivers. It could actually hunt on land in lean times. But that came at a problem, because it would quite often come into contact with any other large predator living in the same environment. And Spinosaurus was in fact the last and the largest of the fish-eating dinosaurs. But ultimately, these specialists were doomed. Something way beyond their control caused their downfall, and it was 94 million years ago when the climate changed. When global sea levels began to rise, the swamps and rivers that Spinosaurus thrived in disappeared. And with their loss, they were brought into competition with other large predators, and their specialism soon became a vulnerability. And the biggest predator that has ever walked the earth disappeared. But Spinosaurus wasn't the only giant predator which thrived in North Africa. There was also this guy, Carcharodontosaurus. He was around the same time as Spinosaurus, but unlike Spinosaurus that lived around the rivers, Carcharodontosaurus was a land-based predator. It was a meat-eater, a member of the carnosaur group. It was actually a cousin of Allosaurus, but about 4 times bigger. And when I say bigger, I mean a fully grown adult could have grown to be 13 meters long, weighed about 4 tons, had teeth that were 16 inches in length, and, like Spinosaurus, it too was bigger than T-Rex. Of course, those big animals needed big hunting grounds, and Carcharodontosaurus would have probably needed up to 150 or 500 square kilometres, so that made competition for the best hunting grounds intense. And of course, in many large carnivores we find injuries on the skulls that turn out to be bite marks made by others of their kind. Like tooth puncture marks and gouges are remarkably common, and it's actually believed that the violent head and face biting is believed to be likely territorial. Carcharodontosaurus may have been big, but they were ambush predators, and a lot of their prey was things like the duck-billed Tyrannosaurus that were about 7 meters long and about 3 tons in weight. But they could have been quite difficult to catch because they would have always been alert. But it's actually believed that Carcharodontosaurus had a hidden advantage. In the 2000s, when they studied the bones of these animals, they looked and saw that they might have had a system of air sacs. Now, air sacs are used in breathing. They make sure that oxygen-rich air flows continually through the lungs when breathing in and out. It's a very efficient system, similar to modern birds. And it implied that Carcharodontosaurus had a fair bit of stamina, and it was an active hunter, and it needed to be, because a dinosaur of this size would need to eat about 60 kilos of meat every day simply to survive. But, despite the fact that they were deadly predators, their skull has been shown to be relatively weak, so they would have been unable to hold on to struggling prey. And their teeth were thin, like knives, so they couldn't bite easily through bone. But they were very sharp, with serrations on the front and back, just like a shark's. In fact, and this is one for your friends, the very name Carcharodontosaurus means shark-toothed lizard. And it's actually thought that Carcharodontosaurus would have used its skull and teeth to slash deep into the flesh of its prey to cause massive injury and blood loss. And such an attack wouldn't have needed not have needed an intense struggle, so Carcharodontosaurus could have just pulled back and waited for its prey to die. But, as I mentioned earlier, when they were around the same time as Spinosaurus, and it's actually been shown that they might have come into contact with and fought for food, when in 2008 a Spinosaurus vertebrae was recovered from Morocco, with part of the tall neural bone of the spine was broken off. It appeared that it was bitten in half, and it's been suggested that the bite was inflicted by Carcharodontosaurus, because if both Carcharodontosaurus and Spinosaurus came up against each other, it would have been Why to